Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our June work session and action meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mrs. Sugars, will you please take roll call?
Mrs. Arroyo?
Here.
Ms. Friedel?
Here.
Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mrs. Neary?
Here.
Mr. Avadia?
Here.
Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Mrs. Tong? Mrs. Seidel?
Here. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Malash for a moment because also on attendance this evening we have our new student representatives that he's going to introduce for us.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Seidel. I'm very excited that our new student representatives and I believe the alternates are on this evening to watch. This is their first official meeting. We will swear them in, ideally in person, coming up soon. We're not going to do that quite yet, but we will go through that process. So our board rep from High School East is Naomi Barakitab. Our board rep from High School West is Nathan Kong. And then the alternate from High School East is Aubrey Demersian. The alternate from High School West is Alex Turley. We are very excited to hear from our students again as they are on the board. It's one of the most important positions that a senior in high school and Cherry Hill can occupy during their final year with us. So to the 4 students who are serving as the reps and the alternates, we are grateful and we look forward to your first reports. That'll be 2 weeks from tonight on June the 23rd. So we will look forward to seeing you.
Welcome. Okay. Next up this evening, we do have some presentations. We are going to hear from the committees that were created in response to our strategic goals.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Seidel. So excited I believe we have people on the call that are ready to go that will be presenting. I'm going to scan through in a minute as I introduce this work that's been done. So as you all recall, last spring, during the spring of 2019, there was an ad hoc committee of the board that met following the failure of the bond referendum in December of 2018. One of the recommendations that came out of the ad hoc committee was to take a good long look at the school district, do some in-depth study about where we are, what our vision was and is, and where we are moving into the future. We worked with Mrs. Judy Wilson, who spent time with us during the summer, throughout the fall, and into the winter. During the time that Judy was with us, she did focus groups, she met with individuals, students, staff, community members, people throughout Cherry Hill, and we also released a survey that went out late in November, December, over the winter break into January, and we ended up with thousands of data points that came through between the interviews that she did, the small groups that she had, and the survey work. For 2 days in January, January the 14th and January the 15th, there was a committee of almost 30 people that represented students and staff members, instructional staff, support staff. There were board members that sat, administrators who were on the committee, again, to take all of that information, to analyze it, and to come up with strategic planning goals. And in February of this year, February 2020, the board adopted 3 strategic planning goals to guide our school district from 2020 through 2025. An incredibly bold step that the Board of Education was willing to support as we move forward in identifying who we are, what we believe is important, and how we're going to make our decisions as a school district. So I just want to remind everybody of what those 3 goals are before I introduce our subcommittees. So the strategic planning goals for 2020 through 2025, which can be found on our website if you're viewing from home. Start with building upon our strong foundations of academic excellence, inclusion, voice, and cultural proficiency. We will, in the area of student wellness, create frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. Under the category of purpose and passion, We will develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and a passion for learning. And under the category of connecting beyond our classrooms, we will provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. So again, incredibly bold statements to guide our school district as we move forward in the next 5 years. After those 2 days that we spent together in January and after the board adoption of those goals in February, we seated subcommittees that were made up of a combination of folks who were on the original committee that met in January, and then additional staff members that were recommended from across the district. All 19 of our schools were represented in these 3 subcommittees and represented in the work that was done. So I'm very excited tonight to welcome in the area of student wellness. We're going to have, I believe, the co-chairs from that committee, Ms. Rebecca Metzger, who's an assistant principal at High School East, and Ms. Kathleen McElhenney, who's a kindergarten teacher at Woodcrest Elementary School, are on with us. Ms. Metzger, I see you. Ms. McElhenney, are you with us as well? There you are. I see you as well. And I just want to turn this over to the ladies. I'm going to put up a little handout again that we will distribute after the presentations tonight. Just find it. Bear with me, I apologize. I'm gonna get us there. Let's see that. Ms. Metzger, can you still see us?
I can see Mrs. Matlick, Mr. Plavinsky, and yourself. Well, not the boardroom. Your.
Okay.
I didn't see anybody.
Would you like me just to verbally introduce the background for a moment?
Yes, Ms. Metzger, as I try to get us situated here on the screen, yes, if you would talk about, thank you, the Student Wellness Committee report recommendations to the Cherry Hill Board. If you would go introduce the committee members who hopefully are watching this evening, and then talk about the work that you all did.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for inviting us tonight to present on the work that was done over the past 6 months. So the members of the Strategic Planning Committee for the Student Wellness Goal was myself and Kathleen McElhenney from Woodcrest as the co-chairs. The committee members are Kelly Bivens from Bret Hart Elementary School, Alicia DeMarco from Joyce Kilmer Elementary School, Sherry Tisdale, Alan Radich from Stockton Elementary School, and Sonia Singh, Assistant Principal, Beck Middle School. So the background for the goal of student wellness came from thematic things that were identified out of the community-based meetings in November, and then out of the strategic planning work in January. Specifically, the community meetings identified support networks, social emotional learning, and the whole child as areas where community members felt that we needed to strengthen and identify support systems for our students to develop social emotional learning and competencies. And so as a result of the community-based forums and then out of the strategic planning, the goal of student wellness was identified and conceptualized to impact the district, all staff, all students, and hopefully all of the community members that are part of our Cherry Hill School District. Ms. McElhenney is going to discuss the goal now.
Hi, everyone. Our student wellness goal, students and staff at all levels, pre-K to 12, will experience social emotional growth through the implementation of evidence-based SEL programming and practices integrated across and throughout the curriculum, as measured by the use of existing data sources, including attendance, HIB, conflict, student, staff, community surveys, and focus groups, and new data for SEL competencies and awareness surveys, and begin to ensure and include all stakeholders and voices throughout the process. The following are the 5 social emotional learning competencies which will be incorporated in our work. 1, self-awareness. 2, self-management. 3, social awareness. 4, responsible decision-making. And finally, relationship skills. I'm going to turn over now to the second group, passion and purpose.
So on our passion and purpose committee, I believe on the call with us, let me find them, is Dr. DeVay, principal at Bret Hart, and Ms. Nasenzo, who's a kindergarten teacher at Russell Knight Elementary School. Dr. DeVay, I see you. Ms. Nasenzo, I know that I saw your name on before. Ladies, are you both with us?
I am here. This is Carissa.
Hi, Carissa.
Hi.
Hello there.
Hi, Dr. DeVay.
Hi
If
there.
you want go ahead.
So our goal was surrounded on passion and purpose, and I just want to read it real quickly. Our goal was to develop highly engaging, learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and a passion for learning. The members of our committee were myself and Dr. DeVay, Elizabeth Alcamo from Payne, Jill Hamill from Cooper, Steve Redfern, and Christopher Wiley from Mann. And when we got started with this, we really wanted to make sure that we honored the work that we already do in Cherry Hill. And we kind of worked backwards in that sense in order to make our action steps that we created. And we went and as a committee, we all dug deep into the best instructional practices that would promote engaging learner-centered experiences. I think I'm going to hand it over to Shilpa now. You there?
So as Carissa was saying, we decided to kind of look at the instructional practices. In order to create a learner-centered experience, we've got to know our students. We've got to know the staff. We've got to know the strengths that come from both groups in order to really create an environment in which all of us can grow. So we look specifically at the importance of knowing the learner, which is knowing each student and also knowing the staff, and then looking at certain pedagogical strategies. Specifically, we looked at relevance and purpose, the importance of relationships, the different forms of engagement, critical thinking, and reflection. Looking at those pieces, we wanted to find a way to make sure that we got students' voice involved, that we allowed a level of choice in the way that they were able to share information that they learned, and also reached out to their passions. The world that we live in right now is changing so quickly, and some of our kids are moving faster than we are. And our job is to turn around and take those passions and run with them. And so our hope is to kind of make that part of it a reality. We talked about ways to get that information out to the community so that we can access community resources by putting information on the websites. We also looked at student surveys. Many of the teachers already use them. This will allow us to kind of compile that information and use student surveys across all levels. And then looking at a way to share that information. As we all moved into the world of remote learning pretty quickly, we realized just how much information we have access to. And so this is kind of a way for us to be able to share that with one another and continue to develop the passion, not just within a building, but across levels and across the district.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Cosenzo. And thank you, Dr. DeVay. All right. And now we have okay. And the final group that we have that is going to share tonight is Connecting Beyond Our Classrooms. I know that Dr. Birdie and Ms. Dollarton were the chair people of this committee, but I believe that Dr. Birdie was having some technical difficulties. Dr. Birdie, were you able to get into the call? Dr. Birdie? Dr. Birdie, if you're listening, but you weren't able to get in through your computer, I'm going to call you so that you can speak. Dr. Birdie?
Yep, I'm here.
If you could mute the sound on your computer.
Okay.
I have you on speakerphone. So I'm gonna put your image up momentarily. I'm gonna need you to use your strong middle school principal voice and really project. Dr. Birdie?
Yep.
Are you muting that? I can still hear me.
I'm waiting to catch up with the sound on the, all right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna log off the call because I'm struggling to, give me 1 second here.
Yeah, so I have you on speaker. So you're live in the meeting now on speaker?
Excellent.
Okay.
I apologize for the technical difficulty. I was able to view the entire meeting. I've been watching since 6.
Yes.
And I got to hear the great work of the Student Wellness and Purpose and Passion committees.
Yes.
So I was able to hear and watch. For some reason, it would not let me dial in to be live. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of the board tonight. So thank you for having me. I am presenting on behalf of the Connecting Beyond Our Classrooms Committee.
Yes.
I am chairing that committee with Ms. Susan Dollarton, who is a teacher over at East. Also on our committee, Molly Trincoli from the Alternative High School, Mike Deppner from Carusi Middle School, Lisa Feinstein from Johnson Elementary, Kathy Gilmore from Sharp Elementary, Kwame Morton from High School West, and Jen Taylor from Barton Elementary. And very similar to the work of the other two groups, we are looking to really bring to life for the purposes of strategic planning and goal setting, work that exists beyond our classrooms. So our goal is to provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. And really our goal is born from the district, which begs us and demands that we develop open-minded thinkers with strong academic and interpersonal skills, and really prepare our children to thrive in an ever-changing world. And that's what we're hoping to do with our committee work beyond the bricks and mortar of typical school buildings. Timing for our group could not have been any better. We met with Judy Wilson on March 9th, and by March 13th, we found out that we were moving to remote learning, and we would be immediately working beyond the classroom walls and working to make sure that students were learning and thinking and growing and evolving in a format that was much, much different than the one that we had been used to historically. The main work that we've done right now, because we've been dreaming about all of the amazing opportunities that exist for our kids outside of the walls of our schools, the main work has centered on identifying existing practices. We recognize that before we can dream about all those opportunities, it behooves us all to take a breath and recognize that there's already amazing work going on between schools in our district, with schools around the state, across the country, and really around the world. So we're really in a baseline data collection place where we're looking to identify practices that exist. And we're also looking to learn lessons from the remote learning that's gone on for the past 13 weeks in order to create an action plan that will allow our students, all children, to flourish into global citizens connected beyond our classroom. So we're excited about the work. We know that great work exists, and we know that our possibilities are really limitless. And again, I appreciate the opportunity for letting us present tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Brady. If you'll just stay on. And thank you to all of the folks who presented this evening. Thank you, Dr. DeVay. Thank you, Ms. Nasenzo. Thank you, Ms. McElhenney. And thank you to Ms. Metzger for your patience with our little, I apologize for my technical challenges. Certainly not what kind of doctor, I am not a doctor in technology for sure, but we appreciate your patience. Ms. Seidel, I don't know whether you have, if there are questions or things that people want to ask, we can certainly move on to
absolutely. I don't personally have any questions, but again, I want to thank the 3 committees for the work and the great readouts, and I certainly look forward to hearing more about the committees and their work over the next few months and years, really. So, but I am going to go around to the various board members and see if there are any questions, and I'll start with Mrs. Neary.
Thank you. No questions. I appreciate everyone continuing this work in these interesting times and presenting this information. I guess just, will there be opportunity once the committees are meeting in person to come in and further present as the work progresses?
Yes, absolutely, Mrs. Neary. So after tonight's board meeting tomorrow, we will post these initial pieces. There's much more detailed work that the committees have done as well that we'll share out with the board, and we'll guide some of the discussions as we go into the summer and discuss board goals at the district level, as we discuss individual goals and work that are going to be done within the 19 schools. But yes, there'll be regular discussion during the course of the year with formal presentations that'll come out. These committees will probably meet, as the year goes on, something that we'll keep in touch, but we'll get additional report outs about the work that's taking place in individual buildings.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin?
I don't have any questions, but I do just want to reiterate just my gratefulness for all that the work that's been taking place. It sounds like a lot of good work taking place, and looking forward to hearing more about it.
Thank you. Mrs. Arroyo?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Matlack?
I don't have any questions, but I would also like to add my thanks to the staff who were so eager to get started on working on these goals, and the fact that you continue to work on them during these challenging times of remote learning with so much else to do. I commend you and thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Ms. Friedel?
I would also like to thank the presenters and the committees for the work that they have done so far and will continue to do. I do not have questions, but part of that is because I am a visual learner and I did not see anything prior to be able to read and reflect on.
So the summaries will go out tonight?
They'll post tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay,
I can certainly send them to the board tonight.
okay, perfect. Thank you, Ms. Friedel. Ms. Schultz?
I don't have any questions. Just again, want to say thank you and look forward to, updates throughout the year.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Avadia?
Yes, I just would echo the thanks to the presenters, the committees, those who stepped up to do this. I think, look, remote learning has been a challenge, and this is remote strategy, and it's great to see our staff getting a really good start on these three important trajectories. So really excited for what's to come, and I end my thanks.
Thank you. Thank you again, everyone.
Yes, and again, as Dr. Brody mentioned, there was a meeting that took place with Judy Wilson on March 9th. If you remember, the dates was literally the week before the buildings were closed. So this work was all done remotely with committees of people from across the district, most of whom did not know one another prior to starting this work and engaging in what we have asked them to do. And in the midst of everything else that was going on, maintaining the regular instruction and the rest of that, they put together some incredible information. So again, I'm grateful to the chair people, Dr. DeVay, Ms. DeCenzo, Dr. Birdie, Ms. Dollarton, Ms. Metzger, and Ms. McElhenney. Very grateful to those 6 folks for guiding this, for continuing to keep me updated, involving me in the process, and for the presentation tonight to the board. So thank you all for being on. You can certainly step out of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Birdie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Next, we will move into correspondence, and I'll go around and I'll ask Mr. Avadia, do you have any correspondence to share?
I do. Last Wednesday, the Camden County Educational Services Commission met for our reorganization meeting. Sherry Hill once again was voted in as part of the board of directors. Of course, every member is part of the representative assembly, so we retain our seats, and looking forward to the year, which will resume or restart in August.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Mrs. Schultz, any correspondence?
I don't have any. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Friedel?
Sorry, no, none for me.
That's okay, thank you. Mrs. Matlack?
I was able to log into the Zoom meeting held by the Cherry Hill African American Civic Association this past Sunday afternoon, titled "Not on My Watch." There was a panel of experts from our town and dealing with mental health. Our leaders, Dr. Malash, although not formally on the panel, spoke as well. So it was enlightening. It was heartening to hear all those voices together, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in our role as a school district and the township, together with our community members moving forward.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. Mrs. Arroyo?
Hi, I also was able to sit in on that Zoom webinar, and I extremely am so happy that they were able to provide our community with a conversation platform to get some feedback and really share some of what everybody's true emotions are in the current state, and also pushing the conversation with the school district to ensure that equity and there's a focus on creating that level playing field for everyone. So I look forward to those types of continued conversations within our community.
Thank you, Mrs. Arroyo. Mr. Goodwin?
I too had the opportunity to be on the the Zoom call, and it was definitely very good. And it was actually really encouraging for me, just to, as Ms. Arroyo had mentioned, just to hear that conversation going. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. Mrs. Neary?
None for me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And since we last met as a board at our last meeting, I had the opportunity to get a sneak peek of some of the graduation speeches for our virtual graduation, and they were fabulous. And I'm looking forward to our virtual graduation in the very near future, as I'm sure many of you are. Okay. So that brings us to our board committee reports, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Matlack to share information that was discussed in the C&I committee meeting.
Thank you very much. We started off by talking about our district and building-based goal update. Dr. Smith reviewed the goal statements, and we talked to, we had some guests with us for our meeting. Dr. Marbles spoke from Kingston, Dr. Birdie from Carusi spoke with us, and Dr. Morton spoke with us about West, and they talked about their building-based goals. Kingston, Dr. Marbles spoke about their stronger sense of community, the things that they're doing with their, fifth grade leaders. Dr. Birdie spoke about the work that they are doing in character education and cultural proficiency and sustainability. And Dr. Morton spoke about the Restorative Practices program at High School West that has been implemented this year, and the social emotional learning work that goes along with that. Let's see. We also reviewed policy 2422 about health and physical education. It's a mandated policy, and it includes more than just health and phys ed. It also includes things like financial literacy. And then we talked about some professional service renewals from Mrs. Wethington. And we also spoke about the Alternative Funding Committee and the safety and security recommendations. And the committee discussed the need to have the inclusion of mental health concerns and student wellness going forward along with that. Let me see what else. There were some board member questions, regarding that about social emotional health, which started that discussion. And then we talked about highlighting the services that our school district provides already that we have in place, so that the community can know and understand what it is it's available. And what else? I believe that's all. If there are any committee members who have anything to add, I will open it up to them.
Great. Ms. Friedel?
No, I have nothing to add.
Okay. Mrs. Arroyo?
I just want to add a little bit, just from listening to some of the presentations with some of the schools, Kingston's, their peer leaders with the classes, within the classes. I thought that was awesome, and I'd like for some point for the entire community to hear more about that, just a little bit deeper presentation or something that could be posted with more detail, just because I think it was a great discussion. And definitely the work that's happening at West with the restorative practices that and the commitment that the West has made with that work, and I'm really impressed and hoping to see that expand throughout the district. So I look forward to more of that conversation.
Thank you, Mrs. Arroyo. Mrs. Neary, any questions or comments?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Goodwin?
No questions for me.
Okay, Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Avadia?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I do not have any additional questions either. So next I will ask Mrs. Schultz to discuss the BNF meeting.
Perfect. So we did meet on June 2nd. We met at 6 p.m. in closed session. We did meet to interview our construction management firm applications. So right now at this time, we can't go into any more detail since we're not making any type of an appointment on that, but I'm happy to discuss that in detail when it is appropriate. But we did have the interviews, and I'm happy to share additional information when we are able to discuss that. We did also, during new business, we did spend a little bit of time talking about, had a discussion talking about the budget and the district losing the 2.3 million and how that will affect things. So we spoke about that briefly, and if we needed to make any changes to our budget. So right now, nothing official needs to take place until after September 30th. But Ms. Sugars did kind of review some kind of conversations and plans that had been talked about. So we talked about that for just a little bit under new business in regards to, you know, how that's going to affect the district budget. I know that I think we've got that on the topic to talk about later today as well in the agenda. Our next meeting is going to be July 14th, and that's going to be at the Committee of the Whole. So I don't know if there's any other committee members that also want to add anything additional at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia, do you have anything to add?
No, that covered it for me.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Neary?
No, since we're covering the other item later.
Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Malak?
No, nothing to add.
Okay, great. Okay, HR, Mrs. Tong isn't with us tonight, but we typically don't have any items that can be shared. So we will skip into policy and legislation, and I'll ask Mrs. Neary to talk about that meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. So for the first time in a while, we actually went the full time, I think even slightly over, for the P&L meeting. We started with the legislative update, which obviously there were quite a few. So I'll just kind of jump right in. We had a legislative update regarding student athletes, where they can use physical exams from this year for next year's sports. Of course, you know, depending upon how all that plays out. There's a task force to discuss the impact of COVID-19. There's 16 members. 2 will be parents, with at least 1 being a parent with a child with a disability. There was discussion around the Clayton Model Pilot Project. It's a 5-year pilot program to establish universal social emotional learning, K through 5. Camden County was not part of that trial. Obviously, Clayton from Gloucester County, hence the name will be part of that trial program. Expenditures for behavioral modification costs, they'll be allowable as instructional costs for private schools for now, obviously in the future, hoping to roll out to the public schools. Graduations with proper social distancing plans have to be uploaded starting June 5th to the Department of Ed. Obviously, as we just saw today, Murphy made some announcements regarding outdoor activities and such. So that guidance has come through and the plans have been uploaded to the Department of Ed. A bridge year pilot relating to COVID, which would allow students graduating 2021, where they can stay in high school 1 more year. By the end, they would be taking some college classes, And Rosie, a committee member, said it sounds very similar to the Gateway College program. It's voluntary. This is kind of to offset concerns around COVID and allowing those students almost, just what it is, a bridge year. Then we went into the alternate funding committee, what policies could be impacted as a result, and the same for the security committee. So it was just touching upon that. We had a board goals update with communication growth, social media analytics 2020, and Barbara Wilson gave that update. It was a very thorough update. She went into a lot of information, which was great. She went through the analytics as far as when the Facebook page was established, a breakdown of the followers between men and women, the various age groups and what that demographics looked like, the phone being the largest platform in which it was viewed, and then the posts with the most views, obviously regarding the free meals, was the most viewed, which was very interesting when we posted about that being open to all the students. Then she went into some details around the Twitter page, when it was founded in 2011, the number of followers, clubs, athletics engaged the most in that platform, more students versus adults on Twitter, and then the post on March 13th, obviously noting the imminent closure of the schools, had the most impressions. Instagram is somewhat more challenging to get good analytics on that platform. A lot of it pertains to middle school age demographics. The Minute with Dr. Malash is the most popular on all the platforms as far as viewings, YouTube or board meetings. Although it is the smallest, that's what is viewed. Postcards, the latest iteration of the emails, very popular. And with these analytics, Mrs. Wilson's able to see the reach, amongst the demographics. And then the Thought Exchange was just launched as well. So they're hoping to get a lot of great information from that. They did that, I believe, with staff, and furthermore will roll out. Then we discussed the revised calendar with April the 13th had been an instructional day. So June 17th is now an in-service day, and the 16th is the last day for students. And then there was a second reading of several policies, domestic violence, the administration of medication, updates on missing and abused children, change for the school year, and then change for the school day. And then Ms. Friedel had asked, based on some legislation that we believe, I think we're still confirming, had recently passed regarding the lunch policy, when would we be revisiting to make amendments? So Dr. Smith was going to be looking into that post our meeting. And those were the notes that I have. I don't know, I asked the other committee members if I've missed anything, because I know we went over a lot of information that night, and I just kind of went through it very, very quickly. So if they have anything to add, please do.
Thank you, Mrs. Neary. Mrs. Arroyo, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you.
Excuse me. Ms. Friedel?
I don't have anything to add, but I do want to say that Mrs. Wilson did a really great job of presenting the information on the different social media platforms and the communication. So she really should be commended.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. Avadia?
Well, sort of a question or a thought. I mean, this is very interesting to think in terms of COVID, somebody that we're retaining that's doing college work. It's sort of an interesting, it's a really interesting topic. I mean, something I've been thinking about separately. But anyway, no, I appreciate the reporting. Do we think a lot of people will be in that boat that will want to take us up on that, or are we more of a sketching that out stage? I just want some clarity on that.
So do we. So do we, Mr. Avadia. We're looking for additional clarity as well.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
And Mr. Goodwin?
I did want to follow up a bit on what Mr. Avadia just asked. So maybe I missed it, but is there a specific criteria for who can take advantage of that?
Yeah, Paul, do you have any more? There isn't, I don't think they've released anything yet,
No, not that we know of.
right?
Right.
It's just they've discussed it conceptually, but we haven't seen anything about how it's going to work, how kids can apply for it, what the cost would be to a school district, what the implications are. We're still waiting on that information.
Right.
Okay. So they
Dr.
don't
Smith,
talk about reimbursement or anything like that. It's just kind of throw out as a concept.
Yes. Dr. Smith, you don't have anything additional about that, do you?
No, just that the concept is in development, and I'm sure more details will follow. But students, they volunteer to join it. That they don't have to. That's the key piece.
Okay. But it's only for people that are like seniors, not for I know in some cases some parents have been asking if their fifth grader missed they feel like they missed out and they want them to repeat it. That wouldn't be an option. It was only for people that would be graduating seniors, right?
Just limited to the class of 2021 and 2022.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yep.
As we get more details or more information from the department, we will certainly share it with the board.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'm going to cover what we discussed at our strategic planning meeting. We completed our last building review. We've been doing building reviews since October of 2019. We ended by covering the review of Cherry Hill High School East, and I'll just give you some of the highlights. I know for the board members, the presentation was in your Friday night packet. And now that all the schools have been covered, I'm assuming we will package it some way to put out for the community to see. I know we've been reading it out every month, but I think a visual appreciation of the documents will be great as well. So we talked about Cherry Hill High School East, built in 1967. One addition in 1969. It serves grades 9 through 12, and its current enrollment is 2,158. Over the last 2 years, some of the building improvements have been roof leak repairs, as we've seen across all of our buildings, softball backstop and fencing, new roof in the auditorium, boiler room wall replacement, the new transformer and electrical switching that we talked about a lot last year and the year prior, interior and exterior cameras and door entry systems and strobe lights. Current work, security, vestibule, and office revisions, which I hope you had an opportunity to look at the pictures, and I'm sure we will do a ribbon cutting when we are allowed to do so. There's also been auditorium wall repair, additional roof leak repairs, courtyard wall replacement, and library annex renovations. And I think talking about the annex, I think that was one project where we discussed that, there really wasn't a lot involved in that, but it's going to end up being a big bang for that, for that work, that it really transformed the room. So
it really did. For those of you and some of you have been into the annex, the library annex at High School East, on the one side of the room, there were old metal book stacks and a metal second floor that was used as storage. Really was an incredibly underutilized space. It's a space that's used for professional development, students, it's used for study hall, for clubs. Mr. McCarty and his crew, they went in, they took all of that down, they took all of the structure down from the inside. Then they used the diamond grinder that the district purchased the equipment last summer that we started to do some of the old terrazzo floors, and they diamond ground the floor, which is absolutely incredible with how it looks. similar to the work that they've done here over the last few weeks at Malberg, saving an incredible amount of money rather than putting new tile and all down. And again, with the expectation of it makes it a much more usable space today and in September and during the next academic year for less money than if we had done other work, and still to look at what we can do when the additional work with the referendum will be done at High School East. So incredible work by the staff that we have working here in the district. So kudos to Mrs. Sugars and to Mr. McCarty and his team.
Yep, thank you for that. And then on the list of future needs for this building, much like the other buildings that we've talked about over the past months, curbs, sidewalk, paving needs, interior auditorium renovations, HVAC replacements, particularly in the cafeterias, roof replacements, interior doors and locks, which again is a common theme among all of our buildings, locker room replacements, electric service upgrade, kitchen renovation, which we talked about a little bit about how can we partner with our food service manager in order to make some of that happen for us. So expect to hear more about that in the future. A media center upgrade, F-wing structural work, and athletic facility improvements. So again, like the other schools, a long list of future needs. And I hope the board members had an opportunity to take a look at some of these pictures, and we'll get this out for the community because these building reviews came out of the ad hoc committee as a result of, people want to understand what we've been doing, what we're currently doing, and what we need to do. They need to understand where we were, where we are, and where we need to be before we can start to have those additional discussions about a future bond referendum. So I'm happy that we made it through those reviews, and we'll start talking about the next steps.
Yes. And Mrs. Seidel, just a reminder for folks, the presentations that Mrs. Sugars did, that Mr. Bart supported, Mr. McCarty, that have gone on, remember they began in October, we spread them out through the entire year. They are on the district website. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page and then find the little button that says bond referendum. It's the bond referendum, bond progress and funding for CHPS. And on the left-hand side, one of the tabs or one of the buttons says school building improvements updates. All the presentations, except for the one that was done last week, are on there. And then after this meeting tonight, that presentation will also be uploaded.
Okay, terrific.
So people can find them right now to go to.
Great news. Thank you.
Yes.
The second part of our meeting, our strategic planning update, was our discussions, like the other committees, about the recommendations from the Alternative Funding Committee and the Safety and Security Committee. Regarding the Alternative Funding Committee, we talked about, started the discussion because it's an ongoing discussion, what's the appropriate role of the district in fundraising, and how can we leverage the Education Foundation in some of these recommendations that the Alternative Funding Committee has made? Do they have more flexibility and appeal to donors because they're a 501c3? Some of our committee members had brought up, particularly, I believe it was Mr. Goodwin, that a lot of people looking to donate look to donate to 501c3s. So this is something definitely to consider because they are deemed that charitable organization, and therefore contributions are tax deductible. So something to think about there. We talked a bit about the two proposed positions that the Alternative Funding Committee put in their report, for the grant writer and the alternative funding manager. And we talked about whether or not we could sustain both of those positions given the uncertainty of the upcoming budget. So I think, everybody loves the idea, thinks it's a great idea, and we're just, there's just some question marks in terms of funding, our available funding. But the other thing we talked about, sort of going back to the conversation about the Ed Foundation, how can we leverage that funding manager position again and the Ed Foundation? So I think, the way that we left it was that we probably should start to have some of these conversations with the Ed Foundation and sort of explore these on that level as well. So again, ongoing discussions. This was just the start of the discussion. We also talked a bit about public-private partnerships, or P3, and still just the concern about the lack of state regulations, and the timing of this is coinciding with the bond referendum development, and we might be biting off a bit more than we can handle if we were to pursue both of those at the same time. So timing will be critical in if we were to pursue that P3 concept. On the safety and security side, we talked about the recommendation about communication, about what we already have in place as a district, and again, we started doing that through these building reviews, because the safety and security upgrades are definitely part of that. We talked about the vestibules and why they're necessary, and again, we'll be doing I guess some ribbon cuttings and possibly tours of some of the newer ones once we're able to do that again, so that people can come in and see it with their own eyes. Having testimonials from some of our administrators that already have that in their building, and talking about ways to keep the community input going over the over time, both with the Safety and Security Committee and the general public and general community. And then the last part of our meeting was we had the thought exchange demo, which is sort of a new idea sharing platform.
Yes.
Where an idea or a question or a thought is put out there, and then people have 150 characters or less to comment or agree or show support or not support the topic. So sort of a new way of reaching out to people for their feedback. So that was my report tonight. I'm going to turn it over to some of my fellow committee members to see if they have anything to add. Mr. Goodwin?
I don't have anything to add. You did a great job. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mrs. Malak?
I appreciate you asking me. I'm not technically on the strategic planning committee, so I wasn't there, so I have nothing to add to your report. But I would be happy to sit on the committee if you would like me to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you anyway. Mr. Ovadia.
Yes, I'm just gonna echo Mr. Goodwin's the great coverage, great coverage of the meeting, and it was a good long discussion about a couple of things that you mentioned. It was very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Schultz.
I have no questions. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Mrs. Friedel.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Arroyo.
No questions, thank you.
And Mrs. Neary.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that then brings us into our first public comment. As we've been doing for the past couple of months, we've asked people to send in their comments in advance to lshugars@chclc.org. The first public comment period can be to discuss anything on the agenda. And I'll ask Mrs. Sugars if we had any comments for this evening.
We have a comment for the later period, but nothing for this first one.
Okay, so then that takes us into our special action agenda. And as in the previous meetings, I'll move the agenda and ask the committee chairs to second, and then we'll go to a vote. So I'll start with curriculum and instruction. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of attendance at conference and workshops for the 2020-2021 school year. Number 2, approval of professional service agreements for the 2020-2021 school year. Number 3, approval of agreement for the 2020-2021 school year. Number 4, approval of service agreement between the board and Epic Health Services, Inc. Number 5, resolution approving agreement between the Cherry Hill Board of Education and the Burlington County Special Services School District to provide K through 12 educational, professional, and therapeutic services. Number 6, approval to accept fiscal year 2021 ESEA allocations. Number 7, approval of IDEA application for fiscal year 2021. And number 8 is the consent to approve all of them. So do I have a second, Mrs. Matlock?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Mrs. Sugars.
You have to ask us any questions for discussion.
Oh, yes, I do need to ask if there's any questions for discussion. Sorry. Okay, so we'll start with you, Mrs. Matlock. Do you have any questions?
No, no questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Goodwin. Mr. Goodwin, do you have any questions? I'll come back to you. Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Avadia?
No questions, thanks.
Ms. Friedel?
Yes, on the 12.2, Joseph D. Hewitt, DO, in the information, there is a line that says $200 per hour for child study team services and services under wraparound program. What is the wraparound program?
The wraparound program, Dr. Hewitt is a psychiatrist that we contract with in the district. The wraparound program are the services that are provided by ESS. It's the program that exists at Bret Hart Elementary School, Rosa Middle School, High School East, High School West, and the alternative high school. There's work that he does as a prescribing doctor.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then real quick, so 12.6 and 12.7, we're just accepting the funds. That's the how they will be, what programs and services comes later.
That's correct.
Correct.
We received notification from the Department of Ed, what the fund allocations are going to be. We have until June the 30th to accept the funds. We can't accept the funds without board action.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mrs. Arroyo?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Neary?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Goodwin?
I have no questions. Sorry about earlier. I had an incoming phone call and I wasn't sure which button to push and I didn't want to cut it off. So sorry about that.
No problem. We've all been there recently. Thank you. Okay, so now, Mrs. Sugars, I will turn it over to you for the vote.
All right, so I opened up the online voting. So board members, you can place your votes. And we have a unanimous vote.
Okay. Next, we will move into B&F. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of bill list. Number 2, resolution increasing the bid threshold to qualified purchasing agent. Number 3, appointment of food service management company. Number 4, resolution for the award of contract renewals. Number 5, resolution to approve the submission for the 2020 safety grant program. Number 6, hardship and eligibility amendments to the Cherry Hill BOE 403B retirement plan. Number 7, transfer of current year surplus to capital reserve. Number 8, resolution approving withdrawal of funds from the capital reserve account. And number 9, motion to approve use of capital reserve to fund approved projects for the 2020-2021 school year. Mrs. Schultz, can I have a second?
Yes, I second.
Thank you. Do you have any questions, Mrs. Schultz?
I have no questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Neary?
Yeah, regarding 13.8. At the time that the funds are allocated, do we then review and approve the allocations?
Is your question in terms of how the funds are spent?
Yes, like if you break that down further at that time, right?
Yeah, so these funds will get moved ultimately into the capital projects fund, and we will delineate that by budget line so that it'll be broken down by the various professionals and other fees that we would be working with. So there would be a breakdown. Any funds that are expended would go in front of the board as it typically does on a bills list. But yeah, we can provide a breakdown of what that would look like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Arroyo.
Hi, sorry, one second. The grant, is it, hold on, which number? The 13.5, is that an application you're applying for?
That is an allotment that comes from our insurance provider each year. It's through the New Jersey School Insurance Group. And we have to have some certain parameters in place to be eligible for it, such as we have to have a health and safety committee, has to meet a certain number of times. There's some other things some videos that we need to watch, really just trying to create a atmosphere of being very safety conscious. And so we've received funds from them for the past couple of years. Last year we received a little bit more. We received about $39,000. This year it's about $33,000. And as a group, we typically, this year was a little different, but as a group, typically we're having our health and safety committee meetings. We decide how to spend the funds. So it's not so much an application as it is just sort of alerting the insurance company on how you plan to spend the funds.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Friedel?
Okay, yes, I do have questions. So I'll start with 13.3. Is this an RFP, or is this just an annual renewal and we are approving the meal cost?
So this is an RFP that we put out. We had been talking over the past couple months about the need. Typically, you put out the RFP for food service management companies every 5 years. We had put it out 3 years ago. We had done it under the fixed rate contract, which was new to us. And we soon discovered that there were a couple things like maintenance and purchase of equipment that really, because of the way we set up the contract, needed to be handled in a different way. And the only way to remedy that was to put the RFP back out and to revise the contract. And that's what we're in the process of doing right now. So Aramark, who happens to be our current provider, was also the only company that responded to our RFP. And so we will continue our relationship with them. This is an annual appointment. Again, typically we have up to 5 years to renew. We don't have to renew for 5 years, but this is the annual appointment. We have discussed meal prices. We have to go through a process. We have to use the PLE tool, which is the Price Lunch Equity tool each year. We have not gone through that calculation yet, but Mrs. Ridgway and I have already had some lengthy discussions about, this is not a good time. We have raised the meal price because of that calculation that we have done the past couple of years. And we don't feel that this year is a good year to raise that meal price. So at this point, our plan is to leave the meal price as it is.
Okay. Okay, could you take a quick minute and explain 13.4? I'm guessing this is about staff that we use a vendor for as opposed to our own in-district staff.
Hold on for one moment. Let me
Just
jump into
the
that.
non-certificated temporary staff. It's the ESS.
Oh, yeah. So, so we get our temporary staff, which would be substitute staff, through ESS. And so we do our teachers, substitute teachers and aides through that. And this was an addition to that contract to provide us also substitutes for custodial and secretarial. And we're just renewing that contract. I believe we have one more year on this before we have to put that back out again. We don't use them often. We use them occasionally. Unfortunately, they have, substitute custodial personnel are difficult to find. So a lot of times what we end up doing is just using our own personnel to kind of cover the areas. But when we have the opportunity to use this company, we do. And typically, I would say we use it more for secretarial than we do for custodial.
Okay. Okay, this is more of a comment than it is a question, but I am going to say that I am not comfortable with 13.8 or 13.9. I don't think that we've had enough discussion on these issues. I'm very concerned with a $2.4 million cut in our anticipated aid for putting this much money. I'm okay with the Stockton roofing project, but I am very uncomfortable with adding another $475,000 to the Beck security vestibule and for transferring money to a bond referendum when I am not clear and certain what other projects we have in the district that may be more pressing and necessary.
Do you want to address that?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. So capital reserve funds and the budget are really kind of two separate silos or columns, I guess I would say. Currently, the Beck project is in the capital reserve account. If you may recall that we changed the budget in between the initial submission budget and the public hearing budget to put the Beck project into capital reserve funds to make sure that that project, as well as the swipe card access and the cameras, were protected. We wanted to make sure that we could move ahead with those projects. We had the opportunity to get some funding from Melissa's Law to offset the cost of those projects. And we wanted to make sure that we had local funds available to cover the cost of those projects. We know that let me go back, step back one more step. So also with the Beck project, when we started this process, we were using estimates that were provided to us from our previous architect. We now have a new architect who has been through the building and is putting the plans together. And we've been told that because of some of the things that we plan to do, expansion of scope within the project itself, that it's going to be more than our original estimates were. So that combined with the fact that we're in kind of a perhaps a volatile construction market right now, we're not exactly sure what those bids are going to come in at. We felt that we wanted to be prepared for that. I don't think the bids will come in that high, but certainly we want to be prepared if they do. If we don't use the funds for that project, we can transfer it to other projects. We can use it for other things within the capital projects fund. The $2.3 million that we know we're going to get cut, right now we've been through the buildings and grounds budget and we've looked at smaller projects. For instance, we had talked about refurbishing Kilmer or refurbishing Man and part of Kingston. That was going to be a lot of cost with furniture, a lot of costs with flooring replacements, painting that needed to be done. And those are projects that we're not going to move ahead with because first of all, we don't know that we can get the furniture. And secondly, we just feel that we need to take a step back right now from that project. There were some paving projects that we're going to hold off on. Anything that we felt was critical for health and safety at this point, we have left in the budget. Some of the other things that we have talked about have been things like replacing stage curtains or doing some painting. We're going to back off on some flooring work that we were going to do.
The two new positions.
Right, as well as not on the B&G side, we had proposed two new positions, an HR position and a cabinet level position that we're going to hold off on for right now. Doesn't mean that we won't do them next year, just means that we're not going to post them right now until we get through September and we have a better idea what our budget is going to look like and if there's any additional cuts. I feel that we are perfectly capable. We've already allocated the funds. We've already earmarked the funds that will need to be cut. We've gone beyond the 2.4 in the budget in things that we have set aside, some equipment that we have set aside, some furniture that we have set aside, just until we have a better idea after September 30th what things look like. So I feel that we are in very good shape to address those issues. And again, our mission is to maintain staff, and that is our goal, and we will make cuts, that need to be done so that's the end result. In terms of the capital reserve allocations, we put money into our capital reserve account at the end of the year when we're closing out our budget, because if we don't, it falls into a fund which is called excess surplus. And quite frankly, in this environment, when we're looking at cuts and we know what happened back in 2010, we don't want to leave money that could potentially be looked at as something that, they don't need the money because they have a certain amount of excess funds. So typically every year at this time, we're putting money into our capital reserve account, which is a good practice. That way we have the funds. If we need them, we can use them in ways, that we need to as things come up through the course of the year and for projects that we plan. That being said, we also don't want, necessarily to have a large capital reserve account. So to allocate funds for various projects at this point, I think is very prudent. I think it puts us in a good position in terms of protecting our reserves. I think that allocating funds toward bond referendum preparation costs is a very valid cost that we could be looking at as the course of the year goes on, particularly if we're looking at a fall 2021 referendum. And if we don't use those funds, we can move them back. We can move them to other projects. It doesn't necessarily mean that we will use all of them. It just means that we are sheltering them and making them available should we need them. That's why it's on the agenda tonight. It was a discussion that we had with the BNF committee about the need to make sure that we're not in the same position we were in 2010. And so that's why it's on the board tonight as a recommendation.
So let me ask a question. It couldn't have been on the next board meeting agenda so that the full board would have had time to have a full discussion?
I suppose it could have, but we have 2 board meetings left in June. It has to be done in the month of June, and I felt it was prudent to have the discussion now to see if perhaps the board wanted to allocate additional funds towards projects. We would have 1 more board meeting to do that if we wanted to do that. So I felt it was prudent to put it on this agenda tonight.
All right, so let me say, I don't disagree in the theory of transferring money to capital reserve. I am questioning where we are moving it to, and that's all of my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Friedel. Mr. Avadia?
Yes. Okay, I have fewer questions, but I did want to point us back to 13.9. So just, when people hear vestibule, I think, I don't know if other people think it, but a shiver runs down my spine. When we think about the Beck Security vestibule, are we paying additional dollars for the same thing that we allocated before, or are we paying additional dollars for additional things within that project coming in at this figure?
So we're paying for additional things that perhaps in the original design were not considered, such as maybe making some additional changes in the main office to make that more efficient and more functional, expanding some of the HVAC work that needs to be done, expanding some of the electrical work that needs to be done. And when we looked at what type of canopy, we put canopies in front of some of our other schools. The design for the entranceway at Beck is a little more substantial. It's more masonry work as opposed to just, a prefab type canopy that we have put on some of our other buildings. So yes, it is bigger in scope than we had originally planned.
Okay, and then let me ask this: the delta. So just the new stuff, that's still at an emergency level. In other words, the extra pieces of this project we would still consider need to do now. I just want to verify that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avadia. Mrs. Matlack?
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I do have a comment. I'm on the BNF committee, and we did discuss this, and Mrs. Sugars, I believe that it is fiscally responsible of us to move this money at this time. We all remember, what has happened in the past, and I think that, and I would like to recommend that we consider additional funds for possible removal into it also. I don't know how anybody feels about that, and I would defer to your expertise, Mrs. Sugars, on where that would go and the amount that you would recommend. But I think we should consider that while we have the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. And Mr. Goodwin.
I would just like to echo what Mrs. Matlack just said, because I do remember that 2010, and it was very brutal. And if we can do anything to try to avoid that situation again, I think we should. We are already underfunded, but it was that was just a brutal cut to the district. So I definitely echo the sentiment of Ms. Matlack.
Okay, thank you. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Sugars for a vote.
Wait, Mrs. Seidel, I have a quick question.
I'm sorry, I skipped you, Mrs. Arroyo. I'm sorry.
No, I went earlier, but I just regarding this, I wanted to know if you are going to consider adding more funds to reallocate to that area. Shouldn't we wait so that we have like a total amount, or so that we can have a full just a discussion on what Mrs. Sugars recommends in addition to the funds that she's talking about this evening?
We can always add additional amounts. What we can do is perhaps get the information out sooner so that you have some time to take a look at it before the meeting.
So we would still need to vote on it by the end of June.
Yes.
So you would have to put that together rather quickly and get it out, and we'd have to approve it at the next meeting. Okay. Which is a possibility if administration makes that recommendation to do what Ms. Matlack and Mrs. Goodwin are suggesting. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs.
Lisa,
Arroyo.
do you think it would, Lisa, I'm sorry, do you think it would be helpful to find out how the board is feeling on who, like, I would feel the same way as Lisa and Eric. I don't know if it would be helpful for the administration for us to go around and maybe say how we're feeling about who also shares that same opinion, because it would also be my recommendation as well that we should move more if we can or cannot. I don't know if that would be helpful or not, because we only meet one more time in June.
Sure, we can certainly do that. Mrs. Neary, what are your thoughts on specifically on asking the district to asking administration to take a look at moving additional dollars?
I guess my only thought would be if we move additional dollars and then I guess we would know this already, but if there was an issue with program or some other area requiring that funding, can you then move it back? Or no, you can't move it back within general fund. You can then only allocate it to a different project within the capital reserve. Like, I'm just not sure how that accounting works.
So you can't use capital reserve dollars for program. You can only use capital reserve dollars for projects. So
the surplus, once we move it, that's that.
Right.
But it could be moved to a different project.
Can be.
It could, but Mrs. Neary, I think what you're asking, it could be moved to another project if something emergent were to come up.
Yes, so if we, let's say, we have money set aside for bond referendum prep and we have, an emergent issue that's, $1 million or something like that, we can certainly move those funds around. And we won't take everything out of the capital reserve. We'll leave some funds in there.
So Lori or Mrs. Neary, would you like administration to possibly explore this scenario?
Yeah, I would, just so we could, because I understand what Eric and Carol are saying and the pains that were felt, and I don't disagree, and I don't want us to be short in being able to maintain our facilities as well, if we can avoid that.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Arroyo, are you in favor of asking administration to explore that option?
Yes, and then waiting to vote at the next meeting on all of it once they review everything, if that's okay.
That was not my proposal. I did not make that proposal. If you are making.
I did.
Proposal.
I asked that when I asked my question.
Yeah, but that was not what was proposed. I believe Mrs. Seidel is asking what I proposed. You can certainly propose something else if you wish.
I did when I asked my question originally. I said, would it be possible to look at everything?
Two separate proposals. We need to talk about them separately.
All right.
So let's go back just for clarity. So let's ask the original question, which is whether we want to ask administration to look into using additional capital, moving additional monies into capital reserve, and it's a yes or a no. And then we'll go back and ask if people want to table the vote as a result of that. So I've heard a yes from Mrs. Neary. Mr. Arroyo, you're a yes for right now. I'm assuming your yes is conditional, so we'll come back when we do the second question. Ms. Friedel, yes or no? Would you like to ask administration to explore moving additional dollars?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Avadia?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Schultz?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Matlack, I'm assuming you're a yes?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Mr. Goodwin, same. I'm assuming you're a yes?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. And I am a yes as well. So I think the board is unanimous in asking administration to sort of explore that and come back with an additional recommendation. All right, now part two of that question is, can we move forward with approving the original movement tonight, which is on the agenda? And then, as Mrs. Sugars mentioned, it's no problem to come back with an additional. And I have one clarifying question. Even if you go back and explore this other option, I'm assuming you're not planning on making changes to what you've already presented. No. It will just be additional. Okay. So then I'm going to start with me. So for me, I'm not in favor of tabling it tonight. Anything additional will be just that additional, and I believe would require a separate discussion and vote. So, so the question to the rest of the board is, are you in favor of voting on this item tonight, yes or no? And I am a yes. Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Matlack?
Yes, I'm in favor of voting on this item tonight.
Okay. Mrs. Schultz?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Avadia?
Yes. I'm okay with voting on this piece tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Friedel?
I'm fine with voting on it tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Arroyo?
I'm okay with voting for it tonight.
Okay. And Mrs. Neary?
Yes, I'm fine with voting tonight.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for the great discussion. And if there's nothing else, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Sugars for a vote.
I'm going to open up the online voting, and I will run through the list just in case there's any changes or abstentions.
So, Ms. Sugars, I intend to vote no for 13.9. So how do I do the online voting?
You can vote yes, and I will run through the list. If anybody wants to change any individual item, they can do it at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let me run through just in case. Mrs. Arroyo?
No abstentions. Is that what you're asking?
Abstentions, or was there an individual item you wanted to vote no to?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Friedel?
I'm voting no to 13.9.
Mr. Goodwin?
No, I don't have any changes.
Mrs. Matlack?
I have no changes or abstentions.
Mrs. Neary?
No.
Mr. Avadia?
No changes or abstentions.
Mrs. Schultz?
No changes, thank you.
Mrs. Seidel?
No changes or abstentions. Thank you.
We good? We're good?
Okay.
Sorry.
The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, assignment salary change certificated. Number 6, assignment salary change non-certificated. Number 7, other compensation certificated. Number 8, other motions. Mrs. Neary, could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mrs. Neary, do you have any questions?
None for me, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goodwin?
No questions for me.
Mrs. Arroyo?
No, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
And Mr. Avadia?
None, thanks.
Okay. I'll move into policy and legislation.
I'm going to open up the online voting.
Sorry. I'm hungry. Can you tell I want to go? I'm sorry.
And we have a unanimous vote.
Okay, thank you.
Hang on just a second.
Okay, next we will move into policy and legislation. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, approval of harassment, intimidation, bullying investigation decisions. Number 2, approval of revised 2019-2020 school calendar. Mrs. Neary, can I have a second?
I second.
Okay, do you have any questions?
No, none for me, thanks.
Okay, Mrs. Arroyo, any questions?
No, thank you.
Ms. Friedel?
No, thank you.
Mr. Avadia?
None, thanks.
Mrs. Schultz?
No questions, thank you.
Mrs. Matlack?
No questions, thank you.
And Mr. Goodwin?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Sugars?
All right, I'm opening the online voting. Board members, you can cast your votes. Okay. Have a unanimous vote.
Great. Okay. So we are moving into our second public comment. Okay. So this is the public comment where you can ask a question on anything or make a comment on anything on anything. And you still have a few minutes if you'd like to email your question or comment to lshugars@chclc.org. And I'll turn it over to Mrs. Sugars to see if we have any public comment.
I have one. This is from Mindy Rosen at 6 Fairhaven Court. When can we expect for the board to hear the ERI report? What is the status of this report? What has been done to make playgrounds accessible as promised?
Thank you. Just give it another minute in case anybody sends an email.
Ms. Seidel?
Yes.
I have a question. It's not on the agenda, but before the board breaks, I do have a question.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I'm just curious. The ESSER application related to the CARES Act is due next Friday, I believe. Does that require board resolution, or is that something the district just submits on their own?
Thank you.
Question.
I don't think it requires a resolution.
And sometimes we can submit and then follow
Yeah,
up.
I was going to say, I don't think it requires action, but we can check. If it does, it can be ratified at the next meeting.
Right.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Ms. Friedel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mosh, do you want, or Mrs. Sugars, do you want to comment on the other community question?
Yes. So the ERI reports, I believe we are expecting the final versions of the reports to come through. They've gone back and forth. There was, it's something that the district contracted. There was board action that was taken back in September to hire ERI. We are an extremely large school district. So the evaluations that were done have taken some time. Some of it, unfortunately, was, I think if the buildings had not been closed, if we were not dealing with the COVID reality, if there was not a limit on travel and companies weren't shut down, I believe that they would have already been presented to the board because we would have received final drafts or final reports. We are expecting the final reports to come soon. As soon as we have them, we'll be able to share them out with the BNF committee, and then with the committee of the whole, depending upon when they come through, and then out for the full board, and talk about what the implications are for next steps of work to be done. There was work that was done specifically in some of our playgrounds last summer. Mrs. Sugar talked a little bit more articulately about it. I know over at Kingston we did work with a new Gaga pit that was installed to make it fully accessible. There was concrete and fencing work that was done over at Cooper Elementary School. Sugar, I don't know if there's other.
Yeah, we've done, we do work every year with mulch. We take out the old mulch, we replace the new mulch in. Our focus when we were looking at accessibility was from the school building to the playground. We've been able to confirm that all of our playgrounds have access from the school building to the playgrounds. We did have some conversations about taking a closer look at some of our playgrounds in terms of the type of equipment as part of the bond referendum process.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if there's no other public comments, can I just mention a couple of things?
Absolutely.
Just because I know that my comments don't come until the 23rd. But today is June 19th. At this time, a week from now, our middle school virtual graduations will have already been displayed, as will our high school virtual graduations. The middle school virtual graduations will be broadcast next Monday, which is June the 15th. There'll be virtual graduations for Beck, Carusi, and Rosa. Information will be posted both on the district website, the individual school websites, and information will come home from the principals of those schools to the families. The High School East and High School West virtual graduation ceremonies, as you mentioned earlier this evening, Mrs. Seidel. We filmed the videos recently. Those will also be broadcast on Tuesday, June the 16th, will be the virtual, the actual conferring of the diplomas, which is a formal process that takes place. We are going to hold in-person graduations for our high school students in July. We have identified the week of July the 20th. We have not firmed up specifically the dates. Just today, the governor released additional numbers about outside gatherings. He said in that he's hopeful that by July 6th, which is the first date that in-person live outdoor graduations can take place, that he expects the gatherings will be 500 people, which is certainly an improvement over 25 people. That logistically still offers some challenges for us. We're looking at graduating 550, in round numbers, 550 students from High School East, more than about 320 students from High School West. So we are hopeful that those numbers will continue to grow. We would like to be able to have all of our students together and at least 2 family members or at least 2 guests, were there with each student. The live in-person graduation ceremonies will take place in the stadium over behind High School West, which still is the place that more students in Cherry Hill from both East and West have graduated from than any other place. Because it's July, we're looking to do late afternoon and early evening because of the temperature on the turf. I was there early Monday morning with Dr. Smith and Mr. McCarty and Mr. Schofield and their teams as they set up chairs. We could certainly fit all of our students, all 550 students from High School East can fit and still be socially distanced on that field. So we will continue to put in our request through the governor and the Department of Ed, and hopefully those numbers, they will allow us to do it in a safe and responsible manner so that we can truly celebrate this class of 2020. I'm grateful to the students in the class, to the teachers, to the family members. Members of the families and PTAs throughout the community have continued to support these students. Seniors in high school, 8th graders and the 5th graders, who are moving up. So again, an incredible testament to the families in Cherry Hill. I also want to say that as we are together, we released a statement and additional information about the tragic death, the killing of Mr. Floyd in Minneapolis, and the response in the school district to that. There's been honestly very few times that I have wished more that we were able to have our students and our faculty together, honestly, so we could support students and families here in school and support our staff members. This has been a very difficult time for many in our community. And again, I applaud the efforts of so many for speaking up and speaking out. We can always, it's important that in times of crisis that people come together. The work that the Cherry Hill School District has done in terms of cultural proficiency, equity, and character education, we will continue to enhance and to expand and to grow, to truly move forward with a statement and work about being anti-racist and what that means. We need to make sure that our schools and our community are welcoming places for everyone. The way that specific groups have been treated, people of color, and the way that things have gone on in our country for so many years and continued has got to stop. I do believe that education is a change and can be an agent of change, and this is a place where we can truly make a difference. So again, I'm grateful to the many family members with whom I've spoken, to the many staff members, to the many students. I have a meeting again tomorrow with students from both of our high schools to talk about their experience and what we are doing, what we can continue to do. And I ask that as people speak up and speak out and raise their hands in solidarity and raise their voices in solidarity, that they do it in a movement to move forward productively and peacefully that will benefit our children. Our words and our actions truly matter at this time more than they ever have before. So thank you, Cherry Hill. Thank you to our staff and thank you to our children.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. So with that, thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. Thank you for the great discussion from the board. I am going to make a motion to convene to a second executive session to discuss an HR matter. We will not be taking any action at the end of that executive session. We will come back in public to close out the meeting, but we will not be taking any formal action. So I'd like to make a motion to convene.
Sorry.
What was that? You got a public comment? Oh, hold that for 1 second. We did get another public comment and we'd like to be able to get that in. So I'll turn it back to Ms. Sugars.
This is from Yanni Yaris. I just want to express my appreciation for Ms. Sugars and the administrative team working on finding cuts that would not impact the learning experience. It is unfortunate that our leadership has expertise in this area due to the lengthy history of cuts we have faced. I applaud the adjustments made in the budget tonight, and I appreciate all the work being done to ensure the most successful financial path forward for our district. I also want to thank Dr. Malash for representing the district at the important Chaka event this past Sunday.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now I will make a motion to convene to a second executive session. Mrs. Neary, can I have a second?
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you all for joining us. Board members, please dial into the other meeting invite for the second exec session.
And there will be no action.
And there will be no action taken after the meeting. Thank you. Have a good night.